Coaching podcast. I am Brian Buck, and you are?
Kat?
And we are excited today to talk about resilience. Resilience is something that is so important for entrepreneurs, businesses, coaches, and every day we are faced with how to be more resilient and really understand what resilience is. And also, the people we serve are also struggling with resilience. So I think as we talk about this today, not only be thinking about how to improve and be more resilient yourself, but take a moment and really think about how this information could be something you use to create value and reduce stress for the people you serve. So you want to kick us off?
Sure. I think for me, when I think about resilience, the first thing that comes to mind is a baby, right? When we first start walking and, that persistence of constantly coming back up and trying that step. And I think the most important part that, separates us when we're that little and continually, going after that goal of walking, and us as entrepreneurs trying to build a business is the mental chatter that happens, because we have a lot of learned habits or thinking patterns that work against us. So when I think of resilience, it's almost like cleaning out all the trash that happens. It's just like taking a shower. You take a shower every day to clean the residue, but when it comes to your mental aspect or your mindset, we don't do that often enough.
So would
And
you say then it's resilience or doing that as like a form of self-care?
it is a self-care, and it's so important, and I think that would probably lead us into burnout, and we're going to save that for a later date. But I
Yeah.
would love your input. Like, how do you see it? What has been your experience?
Yeah, I think well, it's kind of funny coming from the corporate world. I kind of see, and it is more tied to burnout, but there's so much talk about resilience, but in the workplace, being more resilient to crappier work conditions isn't necessarily what we need. We need to have better workplaces. We need to have better environments. But when you think about it in terms of business ownership, you are absolutely right that we need to really focus on well, what I keep thinking about, and I recently said this in a different podcast recently, but it really comes to me is there was a pastor who once told me, or the congregation, that we need to learn how to take a punch and get back up again. And to me, I think that's a form of resilience, because so often in the work that I've done, there's so many people who want to be problem free. They want no resistance. They want no challenges. And when they happen, people freak out. They're kind of like, oh my gosh, where is this coming from? Without recognizing you could take a punch, but be able to get back up again. And one of the ways that I help with people that, and this comes from my world of quality improvement, is no problem is a problem. And
Right.
because if you don't have problems, that means you aren't being told what they are.
Are you playing it?
Or what's that?
You're playing it too safe.
Right, yeah, or you're playing it too safe, exactly. And so if you look at problems as gems and treasures, that you're excited about problems, because whenever you have problems, you're going to grow and you're going to improve. You improve nothing if you don't acknowledge the problems.
Agreed. And
So
how you think about them, and when you say a punch, it may be really hard for people to digest it. And I think the way I looked at it is more of, stepping outside the unknown and, getting that initial fear, but not allowing that to stop you or push you back, but continuing to push through to see what's on the other side. And I think, a lot of people really do live life in such a confined space. And especially when it comes from, even as a business owner, I see a lot of people with such great ideas, yet they're so afraid of going out there and, telling the world what's really in their hearts. And what they do instead is just, follow certain guidelines that other people have, and they never really get to experience what they're really made of.
Mm,
So, I think resilience is also about exploring things,
yeah.
being open to being challenged.
You're so right. And I'm thinking about one of my favorite authors. Her name is Liz Wiseman and wrote Multipliers. Highly recommend everybody. If you haven't read Multipliers, I think it's one of the
To
best
check
business
out.
books in the last decade. Have you read it?
No, I have to check it out. I think
Yeah.
I've heard of it.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's all about how do you multiply the brilliance around you versus people who are actually diminishing the brilliance around you. And I found as a leader to be that really just connected with me and my style. And as a coach, that's what I do. Is I only work with geniuses. Not everyone knows they're a genius yet, but I help people find that they absolutely are a genius. And we help you see that in yourself and bring it out. But one of the things Liz Wiseman talks about is she calls it rookie smarts. And rookie smarts, when I went from my operational leadership role and I went into consulting, one of the things that drove me to that is rookie smarts. And what that is she says, when we are experts at something, we quit learning because we're just drawing on our expertise. Where a rookie, you don't know where it's going to go. You don't have that surety. You don't have you don't have those that I would say maybe the perspective that something isn't possible because you're a rookie. And if someone says, "Hey, can you go do this?" and you're new enough, you're like, "Well, if you asked me, I must be good enough for it." Okay. Meanwhile, where an expert would say, "Well, you should never have done something like that." So to me, rookie smarts, and in my world as in consulting, is I loved every team, every project was brand new. Like I don't even know what the solution might be yet. I don't know how this team interacts yet. I don't know how well everything ties to what the organization's trying to do. But I knew and trusted myself that no matter where I'm a rookie, I'm going to be able to figure it out. I'm going to be able to learn what I need to learn. I'm going to be able to hear what they need. I'm going to be able to make those connections. And I think resilience comes from that trust, that
Trust. I was
self-trust.
just about to say that,
Okay.
to sum it up, I would say that that's where it comes from. And I want to address something, especially, from the coaching world, is that a lot of people don't have the support, or especially when there's that transition between a very secure job and then this passion, this, project outside of anything, anybody has known in your life or, around you. You go out there and you start hearing all this negative talk, all these people that are basically, putting their own, limiting beliefs or their own limitations onto you.
Yeah.
And, is how do you, like, have you had that in your business, and how do you actually go out there and don't allow those voices to become the predominant voices in your head, especially when you're faced with a challenge?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to just having either your own coach, having a
I
coach
agree.
drastically helps,
Me too.
and having a community of people that are on a similar path. I
Like
say
minded.
this, what's that?
Like minded.
Yeah, and I don't know if I've said this on this podcast, but I say it all the time. But a year ago, a big influence for me was the Jim Rohn quote about your success is around the 5 people you hang around most. And I kept hearing Ed Milet talk about that in his podcast. And I went, oh my goodness, I need to upgrade my friends, because your family and friends, they love you, but they're giving advice in the world of safety and fear because they haven't necessarily gone out, started a business, started coaching, started doing all of these things. So they aren't always going to be the best support for you. So the more you can create a community around like-minded people who are wanting to grow, like who's your mentor? If you don't have a coach, who's your mentor? And also, who are you mentoring? It's
Right.
amazing how many times I've given advice and went, I should probably take
Right? We
that.
always give the best advice to
Yeah.
others, and yeah, I love it. This happened to me so many times too. And you know what? Another thing that came up as you were talking was the fact that, for example, in my family, we've had several businesses in the past. They were, outside of the States, and they were quite challenging in a lot of aspects. For example, the first business we had was selling merchandise in different cities, going to flea markets. And I want to say, like 7 years old when we were going. We would literally leave at 3 o'clock in the morning,
Wow.
and we would have to set up the tables by 6 or 7 o'clock when people started, coming in, or, even getting to the best spot. So I never really thought of them as something hard or something that was, out of the ordinary, because that was my normal.
Mm,
And then you realize back, in life later on, it's like those are the times when you see that you already have some of the things that are necessary to make a business successful, because instead of complaining of what you have to do, you embrace it. And that's also, I think, a part of resilience. And
mm,
looking back on some of the successes that you've had in life to use to help you, especially when you're drowning in self-doubt,
yeah.
or you're worried about something, have something to reference to, because that's super important.
Yeah. And I use that. It's a coaching technique called flooding, which I'm sure there's many names for it. But, just take that time on just writing down what all of the wins, when have you been at the top of your game, whether it not be in a business. Like a lot of the things when I look at my success in the corporate world and as a business leader was looking at when I used to direct theater. And when I directed theater, it was like, okay, no one was paying me to direct this play, but I was able to get many people to follow my vision and collaborate. And I realized, oh my goodness, those are the same things that I do wherever I go. And I actually have a friend of mine who came from the world of theater, and we both agree everything we learned on stage was more applicable than anything in our MBA. So
Exactly.
if you look at your experience and all these little wins, and you just keep remembering and putting yourself in that space, pretty soon that little critic voice, it's not as powerful.
It's not, no. And even like looking back on lessons, we've learned, we've had another business where honestly, I cannot say, oh my goodness, I don't think I can express how blessed people are in America to
Mm,
open up a business. Because back home, and I'm not trying to make anybody look bad, but there were the officials would actually it was so corrupt. They would send people out to just basically investigate things in stores, but only because they wanted to get money,
mm,
or things that they weren't really working for. And basically they destroyed a lot of businesses that way,
mm,
because even though you were like up to code to whatever you were doing, they would say, well, this is not the right way, and then a week later they would come back and say, well, this is not the right way. So it was like there was no defined way, and they had a lot of gray areas, and they would literally destroy businesses that way.
wow.
So, it's understanding also what you're up against, and know that you have to like be stronger than your enemy. Know that you have to be wiser, smarter, and like be on your toes, and don't become complacent. Don't, think that, oh, this is like someone punishing me for, I don't know. There's like so many ways to think about it, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what all three of the words are, but I definitely love that. And it's a way of looking at your problems and thinking about how you define them. And one of them is this pervasive? is this problem everywhere in my life? And sometimes we oversay, like, oh, if they treated me this way, it's everywhere. And we make it often worse than it is. But the nice thing by saying, is this pervasive? You say, no, it's just this one thing. Now it's small enough that you feel powerful to attend to it instead of powerless. The other one is, there's three of them, but the other one is it personal? Which I think you touched on, is this always happens to me. And
Right.
wherever I go, I'm going to have the curse of this. And we just have to really look at our talk and say, if this is the kind of conversation I'm having to myself and I'm taking everything personally, I'm not going to be resilient. I'm going to always be the punching bag. And I also think when talking about taking a punch, you made me think about this, is it also says we don't just leave our arms down. We keep our arms up to guard ourselves. Like, you're not a good fighter if you're just like, I'll just take punches, boop, like a mop bag.
Right. And then
Yeah.
from, the mindset standpoint, you have to filter out. You have to filter, out the information that you're allowing in. Like you mentioned, the people that you allow to yourself to be around. You have to understand what type of influence that has on your, day, on your time, on your money, on every single aspect of life. Because whether you realize it or not, it really does. And I actually just noticed this just not too long ago, even with little kids, that, parents let their kids, and I've been guilty of this myself. I'm not putting anybody on the line, on the spot, without understanding that I was guilty of it too. And I was worried, like, where does he get that information from? And then understanding that some of the things that he was watching were not really the best for him and for his way of thinking.
Wow.
Especially because they can't separate, right? And then we sometimes, I know a lot of people had issues with, for example, Tom and Jerry, because they said that it was too violent. And, I can see that. I can see why some people really do have that issue, but we really didn't understand it. Us as kids, we didn't think of it as violence, but maybe because we were also raised in an environment where everybody had to stand up for themselves.
Yeah.
So maybe the violence was not seen as bad as it actually is.
You make me think of, I just saw a review for the new Bill and Ted movie. I haven't seen it yet. But one of the reviewers, his name is Chris Duckman, and he was saying this movie was surprisingly an upbeat comedy. And he was saying so many modern comedies are like, haha, we're laughing, but still everything kind of sucks and it's horrible. Like, just the general messages of comedy can be a bit dark and dreary.
Yeah.
And he was saying it was kind of refreshing to actually have something that has a bit of hope. Because all of us if we're in business, we have hope. If you've got a business and you're like, it's all going to be horrible, what are you doing in business? Get some help, because that kind of thinking is going to make what you think come true.
Yeah.
So,
So how important do you think it is? Because it's, I know it's something that I use a lot in my business, but how important do you think it is to have that bigger vision, that better vision of the future in order to have that resilience that we're talking about?
well, we're going right into the title of our podcast with purpose. And purpose and that bigger vision is so critical, because if you know where you're wanting to go, and if you've achieved your purpose, you might think about what's the bigger purpose next. Because sometimes we might get too complacent in our purpose and we need to think bigger. One of the things I love to do is I share, I'm your ambition partner. I want to help you even think bigger than maybe you have gone. So purpose and vision, when things get hard, you are doing this for someone or for something. And that also gives you a little more energy and oomph to be able to get past it. Because there's plenty of times, where I think about like my growth journey, and there's often
time?
What's that?
Is this confession time?
Yes, yes. We're this show is now turning into reality TV, and now I'm in the confession booth. But the there's times when I'm growing that I actually tell myself I am doing this for my future customers because I believe it's going to better help them. And when it's hard, when I don't want to spend time, knowing you're doing it for someone or something helps tremendously much. How about you?
Oh my goodness. This is confession time.
Yes, yes.
Oh, I've actually, have to say several times that I wanted to give up.
Mhm.
And, just realizing some of the conversations that I've had over the years and the impact that I've made in people's lives have helped me continue to want to push beyond the limits that I've had set, for myself. And it was so, so huge. And I think now, instead of getting to that point where I start even entertaining that conversation of like wanting to give up because it's too hard, that I don't have enough reach or whatever I'm telling myself, as soon as a conversation happens, there's like in that moment it automatically transforms on like, who am I leaving out?
Mm-hmm.
Am I not helping if I do decide to go the other way? And it becomes unbearable to even think about.
Yeah.
So I don't
Well,
entertain that
yeah.
thought.
Well, thank you for your confession. And I'll even add those of us with families. We're also doing this to be models for our children and families. I am a huge believer you're never going to get rich working for someone else. And I also believe that a lot of workplaces, uh, you know, we're kind of jumping into the burnout piece, but modern workplaces aren't always looking out for the people who work there.
I agree.
And so it's a form of resilience to say, I'm going to do this on my own. I'm going to control my own destiny. And I really want to make sure that my son learns that so he knows that's available to him as well.
Oh, I'm so happy you brought that up because I can't relate so much to that. I think it was like 3 years ago that my son, was having some hard time in school. And what we've learned, it was that his EQ, his emotional quotient, was really high compared to the children that were in his normal school. So what ended up happening is he actually did really good in tests, and he went to for, I think it's academically talented children,
Mm,
and he was around a lot of children that were and spoke the language that he did because of his high EQ. But what I didn't really understand was the impact that my own struggle had on him, and how like the things that he was seeing. I would always, make the situation really bad and think, oh my God, I'm affecting this child, because anxiety is not something fun. And I
mm,
am open, about what I go through, because I want people to know that you're not alone, first of all, and that, a good support system is really what's going to get you through. And I was constantly projecting fears onto him,
mm.
only for him to come home one day and tell me, Mom, guess what I did today? I said, what? He's like, I was just like you. I said, what do you mean? He said, there was a kid that was feeling left out, and he was worried. And he, like, I don't remember exactly what the scenario was, but he said, I did exactly what you're doing, the way you're helping people. It was just,
Wow.
my heart expanded so much. I'm like, this is why I'm doing it. It's like, it was reaffirming that what
Yeah.
I'm doing is good. It's just unbelievable what they observe and what they put into application.
Yeah. Man, that's a great way of ending the show because there's no way I'm topping that. And I think that just ties up purposely on resiliency and purpose and how all this fits together and why we do the work to be resilient. So thank you for sharing. So
No,
everybody, thank you for watching the show or listening to the show. If you're listening to us on audio, you can check us out on YouTube, or if you don't want to look at us, you can catch us on your podcatcher of choice. People, Purpose, and Profits Business Coaching Podcast. And we also have a Facebook group and a Facebook page that you can join and see updates for when we release our episode. So thank you, everybody. Take
thank
care.
you. Happy to hang out with you. See you next time.
Yes.